Hey everybody, and welcome to today's session, EUC question time with IGEL. I am very fortunate today to be joined by one of my colleagues who is based over in the US. I will come and introduce him very shortly. But before I did that, I just wanted to give you an idea of the format for the next 20 to 30 minutes or so. So we're going to place to ourselves 3 questions, one around work from home, one around security, and one around deploying Windows, all with end user computing in mind. And both myself and my colleague Mike are going to try and take some opposing views of what we're seeing in the market at the moment, and then we'll try and wrap up with just a very small advertisement, if you like, on why people are looking at IGEL at the moment. So without further ado, let's introduce my colleague, Mike Pomonde. Do you want to introduce yourself very quickly?
Sure. Thank you, Simon. Really appreciate it. I'm really happy to be here. Couldn't be more pleased to be in a friendly debate with one of the best people I know in my career, Simon Townsend. So Mike Pomonde, I'm based here in Seattle, Washington. I've been with IGEL about 1.5 years. I'm a business development manager by title, focusing on Amazon. And as the rest of the rhetoric shows underneath my picture, I have extensive experience with EUC and other things, but super happy to be here. So thank you.
No, perfect. Thank you for taking part in this. And most of you will now know me, Simon Townsend. I'm the CMO for IGEL. I've worked in the EUC space, deploying things like Citrix and VMware Horizon for probably close to 20 years or so now. So a worrying amount of time. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this slightly different format. And let's move on and tackle the first question. So the first thing we're going to talk about is work from home. It's been a massive topic in 2020. Everybody's been talking hashtag WFH for many, many months now. Lots of people in IT have been talking about it. It's had a massive impact on how we deploy end user computing. I'm going to take the line here that I believe that work from home is dead. And Mike is going to argue the fact that he believes that work from home is definitely alive and well. So, Mike, do you want to kick this one off, or do you want me to do it?
You know what? I'll take it. I'll go for it. Right? I think that's the relevant. I'm sure most people are like, really, this is even a debate. But you know what? It is. It is. I think from a COVID perspective, right? That's obviously created this new world that we're talking about, right? Where it's not only work from home, it's work wherever you're at. It could be from anywhere, right? I mean, there's this concept of, digital nomadism where used to be this niche concept where people were out and about and working anywhere as long as they could do their job, right? And those were seen as outliers. But now in this new world where people have been working from home for sometimes months, depending on the lockdown state or whatnot, it very much is alive and well, where organizations are shifting to this concept where being able to work from home and being able to quantify through performance indicators of what their employees are doing are very valid. It's very obvious to me that work from anywhere, work from home is one of those things that's here to stay, and it's only being accelerated. And moreover, the concept of how work from home is changing the fundamental work-life balance, which I think has been a huge problem as a gorilla in the room for a lot of workers, is how do I balance this this commute, right? My family, my personal. Now becomes very much more relevant, and we're actually seeing statistically and through different avenues an uptick in productivity because as workers get more inspired, right, that disconnect between working from home and working at the office becomes more gray, and that creates this ability for workers to innovate and do more things. I really think that's the whole concept, and COVID and the way the world is moving on even beyond COVID is really changing things.
Yeah. So you think that it is alive and well. I suppose I don't necessarily think that it's dead, but I think the term work from home is definitely past us now. There is no doubt about it. I think we are going to have to work from home more, but I think many of us are eager to get back into the office. I do think work from home comes with a huge amount of challenges, particularly on a personal level. I know a lot of my colleagues, a lot of the customers I speak to, they miss that personal interaction, and the possibility of going back into the office and not having to work from home is something that they really do want to do. But I suppose I do agree with you that there is always now going to need, we're always now going to need to be able to provide the ability that someone can work from home or in fact work anywhere. So I would argue work from home is dead in the sense that it is no longer, do I work in the office or do I work from home? And they require two different solutions, and we deal with those differently. What I'm suggesting is that those two things have come together, and we need to provide just a more agile way of working.
100% agree. Couldn't agree more on that point. I do think the social aspect that a lot of people that are used to working from the office have is very much lacking, right? There's a sense of collaboration. You can get more done. Even those meetings, I'm sure that people are longing for to get out of the state of their homes are there. And I agree. I think from a solution perspective, the concept of where you work is where you're working. It doesn't matter where that is absolutely going to be the way to move forward with this.
Yeah. And I think if we can touch on some technology for a bit, what I think was interesting is for some organizations, and I am slightly biased, but for some organizations that didn't have a virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI or desktop as a service, that was simply just deploying PCs and laptops for the last 10, 15 years. When work from home came about, they went into a bit of a panic, and they almost said, okay, well, how do I enable people just to work from home? And so we went through this panic phase where we heard horror stories about supply chain shortages and organizations that were trying to buy 20,000 laptops, get them built and get them shipped out to people so they could work from home. The truth is that's not a strategy that enables agile work in the future, or at least not in my opinion. It's been far too rushed. It was far too tactical. And the customers that I'm now speaking to have almost put work from home behind them. And they're now saying, okay, well, we are going to have to enable people to work from anywhere in the future, whether it be in the office, at home, or wherever it might be. But what's the technical strategy behind that? What technology can we use to enable that to happen?
Completely agree. I mean, again, you and I agree, right? No punches thrown in this one. You and I are absolutely aligned this way. There is this concept of, hey, we had to put in this work. I remember when a lot of these things first hit back in March, and companies were scrambling, right? And admins were working overtime. Their processes were discombobulated. They couldn't, reach over the cubicle and, hey, Bob, what's going on with the network there? So there was a lot of these concepts of trying to get that done. Now that that's over, I agree. I think the strategy is shifting to more of a long-term outlook of, what technology do we use? Who's applicable to this? Those HR policies are fundamentally being updated all the way down to the security posture of, what does this mean from the security perspective of how us as a company approach these people? 100% agree.
Yeah. That probably leads us quite nicely onto the second topic of conversation today, which is really around privacy versus security. What you've got in front of you here are two very recent examples, particularly one more international than the other. One of them is from the BBC website and actually about an international company, and the other one from our friends Capcom, a gaming organization. On the one hand, you've got an employee here who's publicly gone out and said that he needs to monitor and use software to monitor and snapshot exactly what his employees are doing, because he's worried about productivity. He's worried about people who are working remotely or working from home not being productive. On the other hand, you've got an organization here that has very publicly been hit by ransomware, and you start to put into question, did they have enough visibility of their employees working from home? And probably assuming the fact that it was one of those work from home employees that was the initial entry point for that ransomware attack. And so I know there's lots of conversations going on between you, me, and our customers at the moment around this debate, which is, how much visibility do you need in end user computing before, security overrides privacy or the other way around? What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
I think it's a very valid topic. Personally, and based on the data that I've seen, if I haven't seen an organization that has the time or the resources, right, based on that picture that we showed before, to actually monitor things even comes into play, right? It's one thing to say I'm going to do that. It's another thing to say, is there a solution on top of that that allows me to identify when someone is, I guess the PC term is, deviate from what I perceive as their role, and that their time is my time when they're at work. I think that's a very big lift for most companies. Now, the most important question there is whether that trickles down to a security posture. I would actually argue that the fact that more intrusive solutions to actually focus on things like working from home and in those really tight pieces of people being productive actually promote more of a shadow IT posture, meaning employees are going to try to find more ways of getting around that. I think a great example is not even in the corporate or enterprise world, but in the school world, as children are going to school remotely. I've seen kids actually record themselves for a while on their PC and then put a monitor here and throw it into a loop, right? And then they go off and they do something that they want to do, play Xbox or whatnot. So I think the shadow IT concept there, you're only pushing that, which actually shifts security farther away than the posture that you actually want to be on, would be my take.
Yeah. Interesting, that one. I actually went upstairs. My son's homeschooling at the moment based on COVID. And I went upstairs the other day and he's on a Teams call. The video is on, but he's on mute and he's got his earpods in and he's working away. And I said, hang on a second, who are you talking to if your Teams call is on mute? He said, there's a group chat, there's a FaceTime group chat going on amongst all of the kids. So they're getting set some work that's coming down to them via Teams, but then, shadow IT, if you like, in their world is they've got a little group chat going on where they're telling each other where they're up to, what the answer is to each question, etc. So, just a very simple example. But to your point, how do you need to monitor it? I mean, there's obviously an element of trust. I think a lot of organizations, particularly over here in Europe, when they've had to enable people to work from home, we've suddenly seen and felt the fact that people can be trusted. They can go and work from home. They're quite happy to invest time and they can still be very productive. But on the flip side of that, if you literally have got nothing in place, then you don't know where your data is. You don't know whether that device is unpatched or out of maintenance, whatever it might be. And so you do need a way of making sure that that endpoint and that employee is protected.
Well, and you bring up a very excellent point that I think is obscured when this topic comes up of security, which is what is privacy versus security, right? I think asset management of the devices, the software, the things that are happening on your network is not necessarily privacy intrusive, but something like the article that you showed about someone taking screenshots and recording what employees are doing, that just seems a little overbearing to the point where I would wager that person might not know their employees or their business nor value them. So yeah. I think the concept of privacy versus security is something to really come into play here. And I think coming out of the COVID situation into the post-COVID world, if you want to call it that. I know I keep harping on that, but it's the parlance of our times. When we really are focusing on what comes out of this, I think the companies that are going to be the most trusted when it comes to talent retention, and those that are going to be seen as leaders are going to be more that they understand the privacy aspects and are willing to create security constraints around their employees that may not infringe on their privacy.
Yeah, and I think very much so in the EUC space. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've got at the moment is if you take IT operations, IT asset management, you mentioned managing the asset, monitoring the employee, having to manage that endpoint. I mean, that endpoint might still need to be patched. It might need to be updated. And then there's this argument around user experience as well, right? Because you've got to monitor what that user experience is like. I mean, we've got people working from home. You don't know whether it's taking them 3 hours to log in, whether it's slow connection, whether it's a slow performing app. The challenge I think you've got is there's no one solution that does all of those. There's no one solution that can say, yes, I can understand what that device is. I can understand what that user may or may not be doing. I can monitor and put SLAs in place. Oh, and by the way, I can secure it as well. So you end up actually having to put multiple technologies in place to try and do at least half of that, let alone all of it.
Totally agree. Totally agree. It becomes a hodgepodge of different solutions, right? Which I think typically IT's always been down that road. This cadence, like you mentioned, of working from home is just a faster avenue towards trying to find a solution to, again, pull multiple solutions together. Is it the right way? Do you want, one throat to choke when you're talking about doing this? I think it's very much based on the business type and the IT cadence and the user base and what they're doing. But I think overall, I think you're right. I think there is no, silver bullet when it comes to that. I think you have to focus on what's best for what you're doing and try to balance those things. And that's hard. That's very tough.
It is hard. And I'll put a little plug in. Obviously, we're recording this for our friends at Computer World. Computer World are a VMware partner. Obviously, Workspace ONE is one of those tools in EUC that is, I think, moving towards that ideal silver bullet situation where at least you can start to onboard remote devices and have that level of visibility. But I think both of us are agreed on the fact that snooping on employees and taking screenshots of whether your users are actually working or not is probably an element too far. But, please, obviously ensure that, a device is at least visible, particularly when we've had supply chain shortages. People are talking about BYOD or choose your own device. It may not be a corporate device anymore, but it does need to be visible and it does need to be managed at least. So that takes us to our third and final question, which is really around to virtualize or not. And, both myself and you, Mike, are very much from the space of working in VDI and desktop as a service, moving Windows into the cloud and the benefits of that. But there are a lot of organizations that still believe that, it's a worthwhile investment to go out there and spend $1,200, $1,500 on a laptop and try and manage it in the way that we have been managing it for the last 15 years. What have you seen in the last 6 to 9 months with regards to desktop as a service and virtual desktop infrastructure?
I think it's been a couple of things, but two key things really pop up. Number one, when companies first in the last 6 or 9 months had to force themselves into this current posture of working from anywhere, they lifted and shifted what they currently had, whatever that was, right? It might have been anything from a VDI pilot to a very solid VDI environment. And they leveraged that and they expanded it as much as they could. I think if you talk to our friends at VMware, they saw the benefit of that maybe in calendar Q2 or Q3 of last year, where they saw an uptick in the number of people and companies reaching out saying, hey, can you help us more with that? I think that was one piece, is lifting and shifting what they currently had. And then I think you had kind of the panic mode of saying, and I think that that's currently a very interesting point to quantify the type of users that are like this, right? You had your IT users, maybe your marketing users, people that had defined roles and especially defined technology paths and applications and data that they had. That was very, I wouldn't say easy, but it was more quantifiable to move them to the state. The harder ones, I think, were actually the ones that we're seen as auxiliary inputs, the administrative assistants, the auxiliary people that maybe worked in warehouses, right? Some of them maybe didn't have jobs, or maybe they had a limited role, and expanding that out. Actually, when you take a look at that, there's this gigantic influx of kind of non-role-based players that were put into the system that created strain on those IT infrastructure pieces. So I think a lot of companies, to your point, they went to, well, here's a device, access your email through a browser, access this critical system through a browser and make that work. And I think just to make that happen, there's a huge capital expenditure to look at that and to get that done. Nowadays, I think the reevaluation is on to figure out, again, back to the VMware One piece. Is there one system that can make that work? Is it secure, and can we do it for relatively inexpensively and frugally?
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I think it really comes, in my mind, it comes down to two parts, right? Number one is applications. So a lot of the decision about whether you're going to use any form of desktop virtualization or whether you can just give people any endpoint is probably going to come down to the applications that you need to deploy. If you're an organization that is 3 years old, there's a strong chance that you've probably got a whole host of SaaS-based applications that can all be accessed via a web browser. The data's never on the device. The world could be very simple. But the truth of the fact is lots of organizations, particularly those that are older, particularly those that are of a certain size, have got an abundance of Windows-based applications, and managing Windows at the endpoint and deploying those applications down to the endpoint is a painful, time-consuming task that really in 2020 and 2021 we shouldn't be doing. And I think by moving them up into the cloud, by deploying them either from an on-prem VDI environment or from a desktop as a service, all of the things and all the challenges we've spoken about, security, cost, patching, management, maintenance, visibility, whatever it might be, if they're delivered in a virtualized way, and that's where Windows sits, then the world becomes significantly easier when it comes to end user compute. The second thing I'd say is obviously cloud's played a big part in this, and the fact that WVD has come in and sort of taken the I out of VDI so that you don't have to worry about the infrastructure element of it anymore is obviously important. The cost of deploying VDI, desktop as a service, arguably is starting to fall and is less complex than it might be. So I think that's also played quite a large part in organizations who have been able to just expand out their use of a virtualized desktop environment as well.
Absolutely. And again, you hit on two key elements there that I want to emphasize that I think is critical. The DAS, the VDI at the end of the day, right? It all comes down to what I think is one thing, right? It's all about your apps and your data, right? At the end of the day, that's all VDI is for, is delivering what users need for their applications and the data that's within those. And to your point, if you're doing it, via Windows and these Windows applications, it's not only extremely hard. There's lots of security concerns, right? It becomes difficult. Are you getting it just in time? Are users able to take advantage of that when they need to? Again, all things our friends at VMware are attempting to solve and doing so very well. But I think to your point, at the end of the day, right, understanding that it is apps and data at the end of the day and wrapping your arms around those is critical. I think a lot of companies have embraced infrastructure, but their understanding of qualifying what applications are critical, what data is special or important to them that they need to keep locked up or secure. I think we're going to see that be accelerated in the next 12 to 18 months to understand those things, which create a whole new landscape and world where things like VMware One, things like even the IGEL piece really come into play.
Yeah, agreed. So nice bridge to where we want to sort of wrap this conversation up on, which is, who are these two guys that are talking to you today? Why are they both wearing these black T-shirts that say IGEL Believe on them? What does IGEL do for those of you that don't know? Well, IGEL is an organization, software company that is focused on producing an endpoint operating system that is purpose-built to allow people to connect from their endpoints into virtualized workloads or in fact SaaS applications. So we develop and create an operating system. It's based on Linux, so it's very secure. It's incredibly simple to manage. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of endpoints can be managed, both in the office and remotely. And that operating system is purpose-built with a web browser and clients that allow us to connect into virtualized workloads like those from Citrix, VMware, VMware Horizon, Horizon Cloud, Microsoft WVD, Amazon Workspaces, and a whole host of others. And really, this is transforming how end user compute is being deployed in a large number of organizations right now. Because as people look to enable work from home, they look to improve their security posture, deliver better SLAs, they are looking at VDI and desktop as a service. And the argument is very simple, which is when you're going to move Windows into the cloud and deliver it in a virtualized manner, why would you then go and spend additional time and additional money on having to manage and secure Windows at the endpoint as well? And that's where IGEL OS comes in. The operating system can be downloaded. It can be placed on a USB key like this one here, so you can boot live off that USB key if you've got a BYOD device that perhaps you want to boot from. But it really gives IT a very easy way of deploying a secure managed workspace to those employees to give them access to those Windows-based environments. So with that, Mike, we talk a lot about simple, smart, and secure, or maybe as you've got it today, not necessarily that order, but perhaps you just want to provide a quick summary on what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way that I describe everything is with a metaphor. IGEL really covers the last mile of any of your access to applications and data, right? I think the hardest thing for anything in this world, whether it's technology, whether it's doing anything, is covering what's called the last mile, which is that last little bit. It's really easy to run things mainstream, right, on avenues that are easy. It's like running a cable down a street. It's really easy to do that. You have a street, you have easy access, you have big vehicles to do that with. The harder thing is going to each individual unique home, traversing that landscape, and then hooking that home up to whatever you need to. And that's what IGEL does in the framework of apps, data, and desktops. Is we convert that last mile. We aid with that to take your device, to make it easily manageable, to make it super secure, and do it smartly, to allow you as IT people to really focus on things that matter. I mean, there's nothing really hot about managing devices, and that's where we come in really well, and we'll do that for you. And then you can focus on things that you want to do, right? You can focus on your business problems or even your own personal attainment to really help what you're doing and help your company to be successful.
Exactly. Good. All right. Well, if anyone that's listening is interested, I know there's at least 2 more videos from IGEL on the platform today. Go and check out some of the videos on the UD Pocket and how that can enable work from home, particularly in BYOD and for disaster recovery type of environments. Go and check out some of the videos around how Linux is actually changing what we deploy down onto our desktops and at the edge. And if you do have old devices out there that perhaps are starting to creak or are still running Windows 7, or perhaps you've got some old thin clients out there that are already connected into a VDI type of environment, and now you're looking at migrating that VDI environment to the cloud and using some of the new capabilities like Zoom and Teams functionality on VDI, then consider taking your existing hardware and putting IGEL on top of it, because that will give you the fastest and quickest way of connecting to those new virtual environments without the need to buy any new hardware. And I think that's really one of the key messages here is we're not just securing the environment, we're not just saving time, we're saving a tremendous amount of money when it comes to ripping and replacing hardware, which arguably is also better for the planet. So Mike, thank you very much for joining me today. Greatly appreciate it. Enjoy every time me and you get together.
Absolutely.
I know the guys over here in the UK are going to have loved listening into what's going on over the pond. Thank you to everybody else for listening in, and yeah, feel free to reach out to either myself or Mike on social media, LinkedIn, etc. Thank you.
Thanks.